goodness gracious, I'm so excited today to share really an inspirational story. We're going to spotlight Dr. Chantrise Holliman today. I'm Angela Odom, and I am the owner and founder of the Better You Project. This is a part of the Better You TV. Mainly we focused on leadership themed topics. We do case studies and interviews, and today we definitely have a treat. We have an author, a speaker, a business owner, and just an all around nice lady today. And we are excited to welcome Dr. Chantrise Holliman to the Better You TV today.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here.
And I am double, triple excited for you to be here. Do you mind sharing your story with our audience today?
I would love to. I'm going to give you what my grandmother would call the Reader's Digest version of my story because it is a little lengthy. But I will start with the incident that happened to me in 2018 because really that's where my most current story begins. And to make it really brief, on March 23rd of 2018, I woke up with severe chest pains and thought that it was just, gas or indigestion. And it turned out that I was having a heart attack. And it is what is commonly referred to as a widowmaker heart attack. And primarily because it happens, widowmaker heart attacks occur in men primarily, and they make their wives widows because they do not survive. That's the kind of heart attack that I had. Apparently, it was one major artery in my heart that was blocked, and I was rushed to the hospital, and I was unconscious and in ICU for about 5 days. And when I came to, the first thing my husband asked me was, "Do you know what happened?" And I said no, and he told me. And then my response after that was, "So when do I get to go home?" Because I was actually training for the Peachtree Road Race, and I had a running schedule I had to keep up with. And that's when I found out that I was going to be in the hospital a little while longer. But one of the things that was most conscious to me was that when I became conscious was that my legs no longer worked. Somehow between when I had my heart attack and when I awoke, I had become a partial paraplegic. My legs no longer worked, so I didn't have any movement from the waist down. While I was in the hospital recovering, I developed infections in my left foot and in my right leg, and I ultimately became a bilateral lower limb amputee. So I started running 5 miles every morning. I have awards on my walls from the races that I've completed. And in the time that I was in the hospital, I lost the use of my legs and became an amputee. So that's where my story for my book begins. It begins on that day, and it's kind of the journey from that March 23rd date to pretty much now.
Wow. And I'm just going to say double wow. Because that whole thing you hear about, thank goodness you don't look like what you've been through.
Uh-huh.
You have certainly accomplished so much even before this part in your life, and to go on and then to tell your story, to document your inspiring story in words. And so I know that you've actually published 3 books. Shoes Without Feet is your 3rd book. Can you just quickly tell us about the other 2?
Actually, Shoes Without Feet is number 3, and I now have a 4th one out and a 5th one on the way. The first book that I published was called Teach, Stay, Love. I am formerly my profession is I'm an educator. I spent 15 years in the classroom teaching 9th grade literature and composition, which I loved. And one of the things that I noticed with working with teachers, because I also was an instructional coach, was that teachers were getting very, very discouraged. There was this was the beginning of what I call the bleeding out in education. Now we see it all in the news about teachers sort of running away from the profession for a variety of reasons. But I saw that kind of early on, and I wanted to write a book by a teacher for teachers to help them stay in the profession that they love. So it's part journal, part stories from my own profession or my own career as a teacher, and they're organized into 3 sections. Surprise, surprise. Teach, which is some of the practical skills that I learned in the classroom. Stay, some of the stories that inspired me to stay in the classroom, although I'm no longer in the classroom. I'm still working in education. And then love, just stories about all of the reasons why I loved being a teacher. So that was the first book. The second book was Speaking My Truth, and that actually came right after I got out of the hospital. I used to have a blog called Holliman Speaks, and I used to, blog about education and politics and whatever else sort of came to mind. And when I was in recovery, I was going through a pretty serious bout of depression, and I was really discouraged because, I'm now in a wheelchair and I don't have legs, and just trying to process all of that. And my father, in an attempt to sort of remind me of who I am, went to my my blog site and downloaded every single one of my blog posts and copied and pasted them into a Word document, and went to Staples and got them bound and sent it to me and just said, I want you to remember who you are, and maybe one day you'll turn it into a book. And I was just like, ha ha ha. Well, for his birthday is July 5th, and so for his birthday last year, his birthday gift was I turned my blog posts into a book, and I did it primarily for him. So, you can buy it if you want to, but and that was his gift on his birthday. And I've had a couple of people buy, and they were just like, wow, I forgot that you did these blog posts. These are really good. And then Shoes Without Feet is the third one, and that sort of came from a lot of people just coming to me and saying, so when are you going to write the book? And I remember thinking, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to remember anything that has happened to me in the past year. This has been the worst part of my life. But I kept kind of getting pressure, physical pressure from my family, spiritual pressure. I'd be in prayer, meditation. I just kept hearing this voice write the book, write the book, write the book. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to write the book. And so I wrote the book, and it's been pretty good so far.
That's awesome. And so go ahead and tell us about 4 and 5.
Okay, so 4 and 5. Number 4 is I am part of an anthology called The Girlfriend's Code, Women's Empowerment and Breakthrough Edition. It just came out yesterday, and just came out yesterday. And I think we've already hit number 1 on Amazon under relationships, under dysfunctional families. So I haven't even had a chance to grasp that one yet. And that is, I'm an author with 11 other phenomenal women, and my story is about perseverance and about how essentially I grew up not as an only child, and I grew up not really having a lot of girlfriends and not really understanding how to balance or master the relationships between women, and how through just this whole season of becoming an amputee and being in my wheelchair, I learned what girlfriends are and what sisterhood is. As you know, I'm a member of a phenomenal sorority called Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I talk about in this particular section of the anthology about how my sisters really came through for me, and I really learned what it meant to have good girlfriends and to be a girlfriend. So that's number 4. And then number 5 is called Noah Had an Ark, You Need a Raft. And a raft is an acronym for resiliency and flexible thinking. And it is a book that I wrote for entrepreneurs primarily, but also for anybody who really is trying to get unstuck. Sometimes we get stuck in our circumstances.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I've learned over the past year and a half, almost 2 years, is how to become more resilient and how flexible thinking or cognitive flexibility can pretty much help change your life. And so that's book number 5.
Well, let me just, first of all, just say, booyah! Booyah! I love that. I just love the fact that you are an educator at heart, and through all of the ebbs and flows, you're still educating in service, giving yourself to others in a mighty big way. And so, thank you for that. Thank you for that. We can only imagine, the sacrifices and, the things that you've already gone through and what you're still going, what's still going on with you physically, medically. And at the same time, you choose to still serve others. So thank you for that. And so we're focused right now on shoes without feet. So when someone reads shoes without feet, what do you want them to take away?
Okay, so shoes without feet, and I always make this disclaimer, is very, very scripture heavy. I am a Christian. I am married to a pastor. So when I wrote the book, I wrote it very consciously with people who are believers or even under just know Christianity in mind, because a lot of times I think people, especially those who what we call the household of faith, sometimes think that, well, I'm a Christian and nothing bad's going to happen to me, and that's just a lie. And because of our faith, we assume that everything's supposed to be good. And so the back of my book, I start off by saying, what do you do when your plans for your life aren't the same as God's plans for your life? So primarily what I want people to get out of the book is that just because things aren't going your way or don't go the way that you planned does not mean that there isn't a plan. My plan for my life was not to be in a wheelchair and not to be a partial paraplegic and not to, to be an amputee. Not that those things ever crossed my mind, but, they didn't. My plan was to travel and do all of these things and run half marathons and run marathons and all of that. So when I was faced with this sort of my new normal, I had to, like I think you said, I make the decision to go forward, but it took me some time. And so what I want people to get out of the book is that, again, that there is a plan, that your life is still valuable. It's still important. You can still accomplish everything that you want to accomplish, even if things don't go the way that you intended. So I guess that's the overarching umbrella for my book. And then, I really like telling personal stories. I think in every one of my books, there's always an element of me. I'm very transparent. So there are stories in there in this particular book about my journey from March 23rd until October of last year. And some of them are very raw and some of them are very funny. I think the biggest compliment that I get from people who know me is that they say that when they read my book, they read it in my voice and that they can hear me. When you said this in the book, I was like, oh my God, I've heard her say that before. That's so funny. And that means something to me because I want it to be personal. I want all of my books to be relatable and personable. And I want you to feel like you know me, even if you don't know me. If we meet on the street and we're perfect strangers, I want you to feel like, I know you because I read in chapter 3 and you said da 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 da. And so yeah, it's encouragement, using my story to encourage other people to continue to press on and do the good work.
Oh, thank you. And so you just mentioned some of the feedback, but what's the overall feedback? What's it been, and what's the reception been to this particular book?
It's been overwhelming, honestly, and overwhelmingly positive. I've had people. I was just at a MLK ecumenical service on Sunday and ran into a woman who got my book back in October. And she stopped me and talked to me for 5 minutes about just the book and what she had gained from it and how significant it was in her life. And I'm always overwhelmed when people come to me and tell me the impact that it's had. Because, you write a book and you want it to be impactful, but you don't really grasp, how impactful it is or how impactful it's going to be. And so I've had nothing but positive reviews. Now, if I could just get people to go on Amazon and put those reviews, that would be great. But they tell me all the time about how much they've enjoyed it and how it's helping them get through, rough times in their lives. And that just, that does my heart good.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what's the physical act of writing like for you? I mean, do you have a laptop? You have a home office?
Okay, so I have a home office. I'm actually in sort of my makeshift home office, and I really do try to be, proper in my writing. I have a tablet with a keyboard, and sit in my chair and sit upright. But the truth of the matter is I have literally written every one of my books sitting on my sofa. so sitting up, at a desk, I try, to be professional. It's not how it works for me. So my process is I usually spend a lot of time in my head before it ever gets down on paper. So I'm sort of writing the book in my head over and over again, thinking about things and sort of putting mental tabs and things that I want to remember. And so by the time I get to my computer, it flows pretty easily because I've already kind of worked through it, in my head. And it flows pretty easily. And I'm one of those people, because I am a former English teacher. I'll always would tell my students, don't worry about editing and proofreading it. Just, throw up on the paper and get it out. Yeah, I don't know how to take my own advice because as I write, I edit as I write. So I'm writing, I'll get 3 sentences down and I'll be like, okay, I don't like that. I'll go back and then I fix it. So by the time I get done with it, the content pretty much is done. I've molded it and sculpted it the way I want to. And then I'll usually have someone go back and do the proofreading part and make sure that all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed and the commas are in the right place. So yeah, I maybe one day I'll get super professional and, sit in an office and write it, but sitting on my sofa with my laptop in my lap is how I get all of my books done.
Well, it sounds like it's working for you. So
yeah, I'm going. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
There you go. There you go. So how long does it take you to write, a book? What does a revision look like, and how many drafts do you really go through?
Okay, so I'm gonna say this, and you're not gonna believe me, but the book Shoes Without Feet, for example, I gave myself I think a 3-month window to write it. If I totaled up all of the actual hours that I spent writing my book, it took me 40 hours to write. So it took me a week if I take all of them and add them together, because I know when I write from 10 to 3 at night. So 10 p.m. is when I start, 3 a.m. is about when I finish. And I like that time of night because it's quiet and my phone's not ringing and everybody's asleep and I can really think. So I would write from 10 to 3. And there are 5 chapters in my book. Each chapter has 2 sections. So that's, 5, 10. So once I sort of calculate everything out, it ends up being about 40 hours. The book, my most recent book, Noah Had an Ark, You Need a Raft, I wrote in 7 days. My first book I wrote over Christmas break back in 2016. So week and a half. And then the Telling My Truth, the one that my father compiled for me, really wasn't that difficult because it had already been written over some months, and I did just put them together. So, and I'm not going to say that that's normal. I'm a bit of a type A personality, so that when I get my teeth into something, I kind of just push everything aside until I get it done. So I'm not going to say that that's a normal or even healthy amount of time to write a book in, but that's how it works for me. My revisions, because I edit while I write, I don't do a whole lot of revising once I'm done. I need to send my most recent book to an editor just to kind of help me smooth it out a little bit. But the revision piece, usually once it's done, unless someone has a major suggestion, it's done. It's the proofreading and the formatting, making sure that the beginnings of the chapters, look the same, making sure that the words and the sentences, the lines flow on the page, because, and I've learned through trial and error that when I write my books, to write them in a template that is formatted to the size of the book that I want. So most books in the United States are 6x9. I have been writing my books in just, 8.5 by 11 in Word. Then when you try to fit it into a template, it throws all of the formatting off. So I encourage, if you're going to write a book, anybody, Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing actually has a whole file worth of templates that you can download in Word, and they're already formatted to whatever book size you want. So write your book in the template so that you don't have to so that once you formatted it once, you don't have to format it again unless, of course, you want to change the size. But I don't do a whole lot of revising because I do so much of the pre-work in my head, and then I revise as I write. By the time I'm done, I'm usually done.
Oh, that's awesome. And of course, you're leveraging the skills that you already have as an educator and a teacher. Mm-hmm. And actually, what you said, literature, right? That's what you focused on?
Yep.
So, hallelujah. That's how you use some skill sets right there. So I absolutely love the cover for Shoes Without Feet. Can you tell us about the inspiration for the book cover?
I absolutely will, because it is actually probably my favorite story to tell, aside from the story of my book. So a friend of mine actually came up with the title for the book. I did not come up with the title for my book. A friend of mine named Millie Lee, called me one day and said, "I have the title for your book. I hope you're not offended." And when she told it to me, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. Okay, I love this. If I ever decide to write a book, this is the title I'm going to use." But I hadn't even decided I was going to write the book yet. And then once I decided to write the book, I sort of put out there on Facebook, and I just said, "Hey, I need someone who can do a cover for me." And about 19 different people all said one person. His name is Benford Dwight Stellmacher Jr. And so we had our first conversation. We spoke for maybe 45 minutes. And he said, "Okay, so do you want to tell me what you want on the book cover to look like, or will you allow me to go into prayer and see what God wants me to give you?" And I was just like, "Go ahead. You and the Lord have a discussion and see what the Lord wants." When he literally, that was 45 minutes, maybe an hour later, he sent me that copy of that book cover. Wow. And I about fell out of my wheelchair and hit the floor. And here's the reason why. When I was in the classroom, I was known for being the teacher in the red chucks. I used to wear red low-top Converse sneakers just about every day that I was at work. He did not know that. I didn't tell him. There was no one that he knew that knew me that he could have asked about that, so that when that cover came back, I was completely blown away and floored. I said, "There is no way that you could have known about the significance of those red chucks unless someone told you." He's like, "Well, I told you I went into prayer." I said, "Well, you keep praying, because look, good Lord." That was spot on. And so, so he's the one. He has a company called Authentic DNA, and he does book covers. He's also a phenomenal artist, visual artist. He paints and he draws, and he has his own company. He does t-shirts. He does it all. Authentic DNA. So, so he's the one who came up with the cover. And when I come out with my next book, which will be the sequel to Shoes Without Feet, that's book number 6. That'll probably be out in October around the same time this year, and that's called "You Don't Need Feet to Step Out on Faith." And someone gave me the title for that one too. So I don't know. I don't get the titles from my books anymore. But I'm gonna ask him to do the cover for that book too. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That speaks volumes. You said so much there. You said so much, and the fact that, first of all, the fact that 19 different people took the time to make a recommendation that speaks highly of you, and then for them to point to the same individual,
Yep.
and then for you to take the time to share his information. Oh, by the way, I think I'm holding myself down so I don't jump up and start just jumping, bouncing up and down right here. Now, so with your background in education and the fact that you've written 5, and actually it sounds like 6 is coming right after that. Who is your favorite author? Your favorite book?
That's easy. Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Their Eyes Were Watching God. Yes.
When I was in high school, I've always been an avid reader, and my mother was very adamant. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and there weren't a whole lot of Black women that were sort of being, pushed out there in the media. And so my mother, who is also a former English teacher, it was very important to her that there were lots of things for me to read in the house that reflected not only me as a girl, but us as African Americans. And so, books were in my house, all of the time. And I remember being 16 and coming across Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I remember I got it and I stayed up all night and read it until I was finished.
Wow.
And it was one of the more transformational texts for me as a young 16-year-old African-American teenage girl. I always loved reading and I always loved writing, but that book spoke to me. And to this day, it is by far my favorite book. She is my favorite author. I actually did some research on her through the National Endowment for the Humanities. I won a grant to go to Eatonville, Florida, and study her and meet and she was an English teacher. I found that out. So, I figure I'm in the right place, and I was able to go and study her and actually meet some of her students who still live in that city in Florida, and just fell in love all over again. So I'm a huge Zora Neale Hurston fan. And today is the Zeta's Founders Day, and she was a Zeta. So,
Nice.
Happy Founders Day, Zora.
What's your most valuable piece of advice you've received as an author?
Most valuable piece of advice is be your authentic self.
Be your authentic self.
If you are writing unless you're writing a piece that is not attached to you, but even in that, I think there's a way to be authentically you.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's don't try to be like anybody else. Be yourself. Mm-hmm. You can have people that you admire. Like I said, Zora Neale Hurston is my favorite author, and there are plenty of authors that I admire. I think at some point in my early years of writing, I was trying to kind of style myself after authors that I liked. And it was very difficult because, there's an old adage that says, no one can beat you at being you.
Yeah.
And I was trying to be someone else. And when I embraced the fact that I'm goofy and I'm quirky and I'm emotional, I cry at animal commercials. I have this very odd sense of humor. I kind of, if you read my books, all of that comes out. And I think that's what makes people feel like they know me and they're relatable. And I like that. I like that. So just be authentic. Be who you are.
That is perfect. That is perfect. What are you working on right now that's really, really got you excited?
Let me think. So I am working on a couple of things. Because I am a former teacher, I always have my heart is always in somebody's classroom, either with my educators or my students. And so I'm working on this is simultaneously because I don't know how to do things, in a normal manner. But I'm working on a book series for new and novice teachers, or teachers who are struggling in the classroom, specifically grades 6 through 12, because those are the grades that I taught. And it's called the Dynamic Educator Blueprint. And it is a series of steps on how to get the results that you want in the classroom. I am, and I'm not bragging, I hope it doesn't sound this way, I am an award-winning educator. I've won multiple awards for my teaching practice. And so I want to be able to take what I've learned and help this next generation of teachers coming up, because God bless them, there are still people who want to be teachers. And I don't want them to get bombarded by sort of the negativity and the challenges that come along with that. And I want to sort of give them some tools that they can use and hit the ground running so that they can be successful in the classroom. It's not an overnight process, but there is a process that I've kind of worked out that works. And I've helped other teachers become successful. So I'm working on that. And then I'm working on taking the No, I Have That Arc, You Need a Raft, that whole book, and turning that into an online course that people can take, specifically for entrepreneurs who kind of, I've learned entrepreneurs, as a new entrepreneur, we kind of get stuck in our own head and we can't, we have this vision of how things are supposed to be. But when you work on being resilient and you work on flexible thinking, you can kind of break out of those boundaries and kind of, launch out into the deep. And so I'm working on that. And what else am I working on? I'm working on, working on a course to teach entrepreneurs how to be teachers. So if you are an entrepreneur and you make really good baskets and you want to teach other people how to make really good baskets, who better than to teach you how to teach than a teacher? So I want to help entrepreneurs turn their expertise into training modules so that they can further diversify whatever their brand is. So that's what I'm working on.
Oh, that's all.
Yeah, that's all. That's what I'm working on.
I love it. And so we talked mostly about your books. Where can people get their hands on your books? Where can they get their own copies?
If you want to reach me for any reason, because I also do professional development, I also do professional public speaking engagements. Or if you want my books, or if you just want to follow me, or if you when all my stuff comes out, you want to purchase whatever. Real simple, you can go to www.drchantrise.com. And my name, the way it's spelled, it's actually spelled Chantrise. So if you take the word chant and stick it together with the word rise, that's the way you spell my name. So www.drchantrise.com is how you can get access to me and all of the stuff that I am working on.
Oh my goodness! Well, this has been such a treat, and I do definitely appreciate your time. Appreciate all that you're giving to just the world. Talking about pouring out a blessing on so many people. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. It's
fun. So again, I'm Angela Odom, and I'm the founder and the owner of the Better You Project. This is the very first author spotlight for Better You TV. And as always, I'm rooting for you.